Hey guys, and welcome back to Battlefront updates and some fresh Battlefront 2 gameplay of BB-8 and BB-9E who just dropped into the game. And this is the first time they released two heroes at the same time to this game ever, I think. They used to do that for the last game, and I always did these kind of versus videos where I showed both the heroes, talked about the differences, which one I preferred the most, and so on. So I figured I would do the same thing here while I let some gameplay roll in the background. I managed to play a couple of rounds of heroes versus villains and of course some instant action, so I'm going to show you all of that. And obviously it's probably a little bit too early to give a final judgment of which hero I prefer and so on, but I still wanted to do one of these videos as they were really popular back in the Battlefront 2015 days, and yeah, I figured you can still get a pretty good first impression of playing a few rounds and see which one you prefer the most. But as always, the more you play, the more you're going to get used to the heroes and so on. So my initial thoughts and feeling when playing them was that they were exactly as they were told to be. BB-8 a little bit more offensive, BB-9E a little bit more supportive. And I did better with BB-8 in terms of score and kills in heroes versus villains and in instant action as well. But I felt like I was more supportive with BB-9E, I guess, which tends to mean you get less score, less kills, and so on. But overall, I really felt like they worked surprisingly well. I was expecting a fair bit of glitches and so on with all the various force abilities like force chokes and everything, but it worked really well, and it was fun to see, well, BB-8 being force choked, for instance, and his head kind of coming off the body a little bit. And so on. In terms of how they play out, they have the same shock prod first ability, which is like a little bit of a spam click ability that you can use to damage enemies in front of you, and you also do knock them down with the first one. I think it's basically like a diminishing return, if I understand correctly, where the first one will knock them down, at least for heroes, and then after that you will just do damage. So I thought it was really effective to kind of go around, sap an enemy so they get knocked down, let my teammates do most of the work, and then go sap another one, because you can't deal that much consistent damage with neither of them. But in a one-on-one situation, you tend to lose most of the fights. I don't think I had a straight up one-on-one that I won with against any of the heroes. Could potentially work against a blaster hero if you're rolling around and they can't hit you and so on. Like for Aiden and Han, I were able to pretty much beat. I think if I would have used my abilities a little bit better, I could definitely have gotten them. So if you compare the abilities a little bit, because the passive abilities are pretty much the same, the only difference is that BB-8 boosts the cooldown speed of friendly characters, and BB-9E will passively regenerate the health of close allies. But if we're talking about the other abilities, the first one is a support ability for both of them, resistance backing for BB-8, while he scrambles the enemy radar while revealing the hostiles to himself and his allies. If attacked, revealed enemies will take increased damage. Versus for BB-9E, we got a smoke screen, which will obstruct enemies' vision while revealing their position at the same time. So I think I prefer the resistance backing here with scrambling the enemy radar, and also of course the increased damage. I'm not sure how much that increase of damage is. It's a bit tricky to say. The smoke screen does unfortunately feel a little bit like Lando's, where it doesn't really do much. It did say even in the loading screen that if you are using a lightsaber wielder, you're gonna have a hard time hitting the enemies and locking onto them in the smoke screen, so that might still be a big difference. But in terms of the actual obstructing enemy vision, I didn't think it was a big problem. It was pretty easy to see through. So when it comes to things like, well, not being able to lock on with a lightsaber, I feel like I kind of need to be on the lightsaber wielding side to feel that difference. Smoke screens have just never been, well, something I'm a huge fan of in Battlefront. But it might be something you get used to more, or slash find more annoying if you're on the lightsaber wielding side, so to say. But overall, the resistance backing felt more helpful. And then for the middle ability, cable spin versus shock spin, they work pretty similarly. Cable spin, well, BB-8 spins around, damages enemies around him. Simple as that. Shock spin, same thing, but when you activate it, you also push back and damage enemies. And then if you're further away, you will have your blaster overheated and grenades disrupted, but you will also damage for the remainder of the active time. So basically, shock spin was good because you're able to do like a one-time push when you activate it and someone's close to you, but it felt like cable spin did a lot more damage over time. So at least in like an instant action, I was able to wipe out a lot of enemies with cable spin, versus shock spin, not so much, but more of a like an initial knock. So I think they both had their uses. I think I still prefer the cable spin a little bit. Again, pretty early to judge, I would say. But shock spin might be better for like crowd control in Heroes versus Villains. So that's kind of how I felt. Again, I could control the enemies more with BB-9E, but I'm not sure if that makes up for doing less damage, if that makes sense. As for the third ability, Rolling Charge versus Charge Up. Rolling Charge, you roll forward and you knock down and damage the enemy if you hit him. Basically, a little bit like a shoulder charge, but for BB-8. I think it works just as intended. Really fun ability to engage with. Worked pretty well at knocking down enemies in both Heroes versus Villains and instant action. So definitely a fun ability to use, that's for sure. And I think it's you need to get kind of close with, well, both of these heroes. So it's a good way to get closer to the enemies, to a way that you can't really do with BB-9E. As for his BB-9E's charge up ability, the charge up ability makes his shock prod and any friendly blasters immune to overheating. In addition to that, you will have the recharge time reduced of close by allies. So this was an ability that I did quite like. Again, rolling charge versus charge up is quite different, but I did definitely feel that when my abilities were on cooldown with BB-8 and I could only use my shock prod, I kind of missed having like a charge up ability that I could use to basically spam the shock prod, because it does overheat fairly easily. So here it's all situational. Rolling charge versus charge up, I think it's hard to pick a favorite really. It also depends on which situation you're in, but I thought they both had their uses. And overall, I just like offensive heroes more, so I think BB-8 is going to be my favorite out of these two, at least from initial impressions. But they both felt really well balanced and like they have a use on the battlefront, and they won't be overpowered and they won't be underpowered either, I hope. Again, in a one-on-one situation with a hero, maybe not, but that's not what they're made for, I think. I really want to try them out in Capital Supremacy as well. I think they could come in to be very handy if you kind of stay in the background, try to boost up your teammates a little bit and generate a lot of score that way. The problem is just if you want to get close to do some damage, you are gonna die pretty fast with both of them. That's for sure, both against blaster wielders and lightsaber heroes. So it's a little bit depends on how you want to play it, more supportive, or if you want to go and get some kills and die. But yeah, I think that wraps up my initial thoughts of these two heroes. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think, as obviously your impressions might change the more you play. And I'm also going to hope to try and get some Capital Supremacy gameplay with these heroes for you guys up later today. So yeah, enjoy the rest of the gameplay and thank you very much for watching.
That Jedi is skywalking over the competition. Chosen one, countless victims.
The numbers are too thin. Trust Vader. I'll face him myself.
Your domination is not as complete as you think. Still halfway to go.
Who made it? Wait for my time.
Crack ocean thunder from boss.
Try again, Laser Brain.
The Emperor of Extermination strikes again.
Ready to quit yet?
Anger and hate seize the day as Kylo Ren